Hey, hi, hello. Welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be doing my first 6 months of 2021 stats video. I'm going to be going over 3 things pretty quickly with you all. My stats for the first 6 months of 2021, my goal, like how my goals have been going for the first half of 2021, and if I've made any alterations, changes, or set any new goals for myself in the second half of the year. So I actually made one of these videos in my first 6 months of 2020 and then never followed up in the end of 2020. And that's simply because I ran out of time and I had too many videos I wanted to film in December. I will be looking at my computer, and what I am looking at, I will put on screen for you all. I keep all of my trackers in 3 locations. I keep a tracker in Goodreads, which everyone online can see. I keep a tracker in my reading journal, which is just for me. And then I keep an online tracker in Notion, which is where I kind of organize everything. So I'm going to be looking mostly at Notion, but I have exported some of the stuff from Notion and put it into Google Sheets so that you can have graphs to look at along with the data that I'm seeing in Notion. So technically we're not actually 6 months through the year because I am filming this at the beginning of June and you're going to be seeing this at the beginning of June. So the big question, how many books have I read so far this year? As of right now, I have read 84 books in 2021. I am currently reading 3 books, which are Words of Radiance, My Dark Vanessa, and From Blood and Ash. I will be going right back to My Dark Vanessa as soon as we finish this video. Out of those books, 19 of them were physical reads, which totaled up to 9,834 pages. 66 of them were audiobooks, which totaled up to 740 hours, and 7 of them were ebooks. I count ebooks pages as physical pages, so some of those 9,800 pages are actually ebook. Now, with the hours, I didn't track at what speed I listened to the audiobook in, and I only tracked the total hours. So if a book is 20 hours, I generally speaking listen to it at times 2 speed. So I actually listen for 10 hours, but I didn't do that math because I've realized with a lot of audiobooks, I actually change how quickly I'm listening to it throughout the entire book. So I just couldn't get an accurate number. And I listen on so many different platforms that it's hard to find a way to track. I'm just keeping 740 as the number of hours I've listened to, but generally speaking, you can divide that by half and find the approximate number of hours that I've actually listened to. From that list, 48 of the books I read were owned books, so books I had bought and owned, and 44 of them were from the library. I'm actually pretty happy with that because it means not only am I bringing down my owned list, but it also means that I'm about 50-50 to owned versus library books, so that makes me thrilled. My average rating for just this year is a 4.04, which is great because that beats my Goodreads average rating. My average rating on Goodreads for my entire life is a 3.5 flat. So I'm beating it this year. That means that on average, the books I'm reading, I'm enjoying more than books I've enjoyed in past years. So that makes me happy. Of those, 18 of them were rereads, so that can definitely affect that number. 59 of the books were in a series. 7 of them were arcs. 7 of them I had started and DNF'd and then retried and was able to finish them. So that's a fun new number I'm now tracking. 5 of them were for book clubs. That makes sense. There have been 5 months so far. I tend to read 1 book for a book club each month. And then 23 of them were buddy reads. That's a ridiculous number. I do tend to buddy read a lot. And 20 of them I read specifically for a video. So not like a weekly vlog or anything or like a wrap up, but I read it specifically for a video that it was going to be in. Of these genres, I do categorize my books into very specific genres. So if a book is a fantasy, or if it is a contemporary fantasy, I count those as 2 different genres. So you'll see it now. 44% of the books I read were fantasy, and that is the highest number that I have read. You can also see though that some of the smaller categories are things such as humor fantasy, romance fantasy, horror fantasy, contemporary fantasy, magical realism fantasy. You have to understand that my fantasy category is actually a lot higher, but because I'm so specific about how I categorize books, it doesn't actually end up working out. But you can look at all the genres here and pause if you want to see any specifics. I have read 1 autobiography, which was very odd and kind of a mistake, and I talk about it Oh, I will be talking about it in my wrap up at the end of this month. But I have read a few horror thrillers. I have read a few humorous books. I have read a few magical realisms. The category that's contemporary, comma, magic, and then ... you can't read it anymore is my magical realism category. And that's a 4.8. So that is almost my second, third, fourth highest. It's up there. It's not one of the highest ones. This chart is not in order. For the age group that the books fell into, 54% were young adult. I'm honestly not shocked. 17.9% were adult and 17.9% were new adult. So I'm reading those two categories pretty split. And 9.5% were middle grade. I know that those middle grades are just because I'm rereading Series of Unfortunate Events. If it weren't for that, it would be a lot smaller, but it wouldn't be zero. I tend to read a few middle grades randomly throughout the year whenever I'm in the mood for something just kind of simple and cheerful, and I want like a little bit of a difference. I honestly thought my adult was going to be higher, but I knew for a fact that young adult was going to be the highest just because of how easy and accessible young adult books are, that even though I do tend to prefer adult or new adult, it's easy to get through young adult books. They're easy to access. Like, they are in libraries. They're talked about online. You hear about them. You want to read them. You get to them. I'm okay with this number. I remember last year that this was the highest too for me, and I thought that it was odd then, but I don't find it odd right now. For authors, I'm not going to be going through all of these, but you can see that my number one author this year is Sarah J. Maas. Last year at this time, it was J.K. Rowling, and this was around the time that we found out her true colors, and I was like, damn, I'm going to have to do something about that. I don't know if I'm going to be able to beat out Sarah J. Maas because I am going to be reading a few more of her books this year, and I just don't know if I know an author who's written as much as her where I could make up for it. I mean, Lemony Snicket, I'm going to read 13 books by him by the end of the year, so he might actually beat her. Next, let's talk about some of my owned books. So I came into 2021 with 37 owned books. So I categorize those as my 2020 owned versus my 2021 owned. In 2021, I have bought 40 books. That number is a lot higher than I thought it was going to be. I'm honestly kind of shocked. Out of those, whoa, wait, that says 42. I've read 42 books, sorry. That number is a lot higher than I thought it was going to be, but that does include any ARCs that I've received. I don't count those as different, so it's not like I've actually paid money for all of them. And out of those 42, I have read all but 10 of them. I do have 30 books, including pre-orders and ARCs on my owned shelf. I kind of categorize them differently on Goodreads, but if you add them all up, I have 30 books. So if only 10 of them are from 2021, that means that as I'm buying books, I'm reading them, but I'm tending to ignore books that have been on my TBR for a while because 20 of them were from 2020 and it's been 5 months and I haven't picked them up. So that is a sign to me of something that I need to pay attention to moving forward. Of the books that I bought in 2020, I have read 15 of them. I have DNF'd 6 of them, and I've put on pause 1 of them. So that's not too bad, honestly. I am left with, I think on my own shelf, if you exclude pre-orders or books that haven't been published yet, I think there's like 23 books on that shelf. I'm really hoping by the end of June, it'll be under 20, and that'll make me feel really happy. I have DNF'd 24 books this year. So when I DNF a book, I don't count it towards my read shelf. So 24 books DNF'd for different reasons. I do keep track of how far I am into the book when I DNF it. Most of them I DNF around the 5 to 10% mark, but there are some on this list that are up to the 40 to 60% mark. You're not going to be able to see the DNF list. I'm sorry, I'm keeping that one hidden because I will have a video at the end of the year about all of these, and I don't want you to get spoiled for that, even though you probably forget by then. When I started this year, I set a goal for myself. We're kind of talking about some goals here, but we're not totally in that part of the video yet. I set a goal for myself of 21 books that I want to read in 2021, and I am proud to say that I have almost completed that list at this point. Out of that list, there are 6 books on it that I haven't read yet. Wow, that's incredible, not gonna lie. But of those, 2 of them are not published yet. So there's only 4 that I could technically be reading right now. I do own 2 of those, so they are going to be read quicker than the other 2. One of them I'm hoping to read from the library, and one of them I'm hoping to buy out of the other 2. Out of the ones that have not been published yet, I am hoping to buy both of them. Out of the average rating of all of the books that I have read on that list, the average rating is a 3.14. So it's not doing so hot. It's really not a good list. And when you compare that to the 4.0 that I am averagely rating for all of my books this year, it's kind of insane. And maybe I shouldn't predict books that I think I'm going to enjoy or really want to read in a year, because clearly I can't predict things well. My other goal for the year was to read less. I do feel like I am accomplishing that, because my goal wasn't necessarily to read less books, it was to enjoy other hobbies and enjoy other things that I want to do with my life, and to not feel like I need to be reading 24/7, which is where I was getting at the end of 2020. So I do feel that way right now. I don't feel like I have to be reading. There are definitely some times where I'll be doing something else and my brain will be like, you should be reading instead. But I really try to fight that feeling and be like, no, it's okay to calm down and relax a little bit. Right now, as you can see, I'm kind of on track to reading somewhere around 160 to 180 books by the end of the year, which will be less than 2020 I read 200 in 2020, so however many that is. Let's talk about my favorite books that I have read so far this year. So on Notion, I am keeping a handy dandy tracker, and I thought that it would be fun that every single month I pick my top 3 favorite books, and then at the end of the year, I would tournament style let them all compete against each other until I could find my top 10 or my top favorite book or whatever. It didn't really work out that great, because I was finding that some months I would read more than 3 books that felt like favorites to me, and then other months I wouldn't even have 2 that really fit that category. It would honestly be more like 1, and I was struggling to put anything on the list. So I kind of went back and I didn't let myself go over 3, but for the months where it was this is really more of 2 books fit on this list, I let myself only have 2 books on that list. So I'm going to pretty quickly go through my favorites of this year so far, maybe tell you briefly a little bit about them. Starting out in January, I read Sina Martinez and the Moonlit Beginning of Everything, which I loved. I read it the second or third day of the month. It was the second book I read for the year. I read it all in one day. It was a contemporary sci-fi, which is nothing that I ever enjoy, but it was just so good. It was about aliens coming to Earth. It was about a girl finding herself. It was about finding out about love and acceptance. She spoke a lot about Mexican Americans in the book and how you're really not part of either culture and how you're looked down on from both sides. I then read The House in the Cerulean Sea because I've been wanting to read it. I wasn't wanting to read it. I was a little bit lost. Everyone was loving it. I picked it up. I freaking loved it. It's one of my favorites of the year, as you can see. I plan on rereading this one before the year is up because it was just so good and impactful. I then read A Winter's Promise. I actually have it right here. Let's pull it out. I then read A Winter's Promise, which, oh my god, fantastic. I highly recommend this book. I talk about this a lot on my channel. It is a French translation. It is about this girl named Ophelia who is in an arranged marriage and sent off to the North Pole, and she has the ability to travel through mirrors, and when she touches objects, she can read their past, and there's this whole entire craziness that unravels when she gets to the North Pole, and she's such a strong protagonist, and I love her a lot. And I've read actually the next 2 books, which one of them you'll be seeing on this list again. For February, first book up is The Missing of Claire de Lune. I loved it. It's the sequel. It's really good. The ending of this just, oh, it had me. Then I read The Queen of the Tearling, which you're going to be seeing some other books from this series on this list too, because this is my new favorite series of all time. I rated all 4 books 5 out of 5 stars, but not all 4 of them made it on this list, weirdly enough. I love this. In this, we are following Kelsey, who is a 19-year-old. She has been raised away from the crown, and on her 19th birthday, she is brought back to rule and be the queen of this land, and she is left with the desolation that her mother and uncle have left on this land, and there is a warring country coming at them. It is like a futuristic sci-fi mixed with a high fantasy, but there's not actually a ton of technology, but there is some. It's really unique and really interesting. I will most likely be rereading this series this year as well. It's up there. I can't reach it. This is the first book on this list that wasn't a 5-star, actually. This was a 4.75, but I really loved The Ocean at the End of the Lane by Neil Gaiman. It was something that I read for a trope test video, which means that I wasn't necessarily looking forward to reading it. And I've tried other Neil Gaiman books in the past, and I'm kind of on the fence about him as an author, but I loved this one. It was about this man as he returns to his childhood home, and when he does, he remembers all of his childhood growing up there, and he remembers the magic that flourished in this land. It is definitely a horror fantasy. There were some horrific elements. It's one of these books where I'm like, was this actually written for children? Because I am terrified out of my bones by this book. For March, I only had 2 books that made it on my favorites list: The Invasion of the Tierling and The Fate of the Tierling. This book made me ugly sob. This book was also fantastic. Both were 5 out of 5 stars. They are the sequel and the finale to The Queen of the Tierling. There is one more, which is Beneath the Keep. It came out this year. I also rated this 5 out of 5 stars, but it did not make it on my favorites list of the year. And then in April, let's get it. Akamoth. I never thought I was going to be putting a Sarah J. Maas book on my favorites of the year list, but I loved this book. It surprised me. I know a lot of people have read it. A lot of people have loved it. It's the sequel to Akatar, which is Sarah J. Maas's new adult series. It's like a Beauty and the Beast retelling, at least book 1 is. This is the conclusion. No, this is the sequel to it. It was just really good. Like, the writing, it was addictive. I recommend. I mean, I'm not a huge Sarah J. Maas fan. I feel like Throne of Glass is overrated, but I really loved this book. Oh my god, why do my books keep being really far away from me? Next in April, I also freaking loved House of Hollow, rated at 5 out of 5 stars. This is the story of 3 sisters who are kidnapped when they are young, and when they come back, they have these weird differences about them. And later in life, one of the sisters goes missing again, and the other 2 go to try and find her. And it was horrific. It was a contemporary magical realism horror thriller, which is one of my favorite genres. I mean, fantasy is my favorite genre, but this is very, very close. I love this so much, and this was just a great, like, eerie, weird, gross book. April and May, I did have 3. So up first was The Sleeper and the Spindle by Neil Gaiman. I'm just as shocked as you that Neil Gaiman made it twice on my list. Nothing against the man. I've enjoyed some of his books. I just never favorited them. And then this year, I all of a sudden read 2 that were favorites. This is a Sleeping Beauty and Snow White retelling, where Snow White hears about Sleeping Beauty and her sleeping curse and goes to wake her because she remembers her sleeping curse. It's a very short story. The audiobook is narrated by Neil Gaiman himself, but there is also like sound effects and music and everything, and it is done just so well. And it was so freaking good. I talk about it also a decent amount on my channel, so I won't stay too long on it. Throne of Kings, which is my book club's latest book. I'm so glad that one of the books for book club made it on this list. I loved this. It is a story within a story within a story, telling about this young boy who is a lost royal on the streets, and you learn about his life from when he's growing up on the streets, orphaned, to when he gets taken into the palace, to when he gets sold as a slave, to when he gets trained in his magical abilities, to when he comes back and seeks revenge, to when he is captured and is a prisoner. And it's all told in past tense to you, the emperor, from the storytelling of the main character telling his guard the story of his capture and all of his childhood and everything. And it was just so good. I cannot wait to read the next ones. So those are my favorites of the year so far. I will probably do a favorites of the year at the end of the year, and I will go much more in depth and in detail with all of those books and talk to you about them then. I'm meeting my Goodreads goal, so I'm not really worried about that. I'm meeting my goal to read less and focus on my other interests this year, and I'm meeting my 20 books to read in 2021 goal, so I'm not worried about that. Out of all my TBR bingos, if you don't know, I play TBR bingo every single month to pick the books that I'm gonna read for the month. I have only failed one of them so far, which is not bad for 6 months of playing it. And this month so far, I am on track to dominate the board. So I'm really excited about that. I feel like all of those goals have been doing well, so I kind of want to set more goals for myself, but I'm also really scared to do that. What I'd like to do moving forward, I guess, is just remember all of those goals. Of course, I also want to have a focus on buying less and borrowing more. I'd really like to end the year either with my library books and owned books that I've read being still around 50-50 or having library be slightly higher. And I do have some ideas for how I can make that happen a little bit easier on my channel. I want my TBR owned shelf to be below 20 by the end of the year. So I know that it's about to be below 20, but I'd like to keep it there because I'd like to be in the mentality of I can buy books and I can buy a few books if I want to, but I want it to end every single month right around 20. And I don't want it to get much higher than that again, because when I was around 40 to 50 books, it just really freaked me out. Keep my physical reading around 4 to 5 books every single month and then just audio as I please. I think that that system really works for me. And so even though it looks like, even though I read a ridiculous amount of audiobooks compared to how many physical books I read, it's basically 20 to 70. I don't mind it, and reading is reading, so I don't care that that's how it turned out. I would like to put a little bit more focus on arcs. Right now I have quite a few arcs out to me and quite a few. Sorry if we have moved slightly. I don't remember what I was saying. My phone just glitched, and fortunately it saved the video that I was recording because I would have been so pissed if it didn't, but I have no clue what we were talking about. No clue. The final thing I want to say about my goals, because I'm not just talking about reading goals, but I want to talk about my channel in general. I've had a lot of growth on my channel this year and I want to keep that up. I'm really loving the videos and the interactions that I've been able to have with people. Seeing more people subscribe to my channel and leave nice comments makes my day. Every single time I get a comment from someone that's like, I really appreciate this video, I really enjoyed this video, or this was so much fun to watch, makes my day so much, and I try to let you guys know that when I respond to it. So some things that I am doing in order to keep up with the fact that my channel is growing, I have bought a camera. It is in the mail, so I couldn't film this video with it, and I needed to film this now so I could edit it in time. And with that is going to be some more lights and a microphone and stuff, so that's really exciting. I am currently moving in the month of June. I will be moving over this next month. When I move into my new place, I will be having an office area, so I want to set that up with a really cool backdrop and have things set up so that it's just more appealing to look at. So I'm thinking of some ideas for that. Let me know if you have a stats video, link it down below. Let me know if you don't have a stats video but you want to talk about stats, put all of yours down below. I'd love to talk to you about them. I don't have any books that I totally talked about in this video. Let me know your favorite book you've read this year, or if there's a few that you really loved. Please, I want to know what your favorites are, because I might do a video one day on reading people's favorites books. But that's it. I don't have anything else to say. So like this video if you liked it, because I love stats videos and I want to know if you guys like them too. So I don't remember how my outro goes, but until next time, I will talk to you in the comments. Bye.